Hi, my name is Iris Sullivan Dare, and I'm here with the beautiful Ginger Edwards, and this is the Nurture podcast, where we explore that edge between what is and what is possible. And oh, nice. We're going to talk about that exact thing of like what is and what is possible, and reflecting upon a book that was super influential to both of us in our 20s that
Yeah.
I'm rereading right now and being completely compelled.
We're all living through
Consumed.
right now.
We're living through it and I'm consumed by the book.
Yes, yes. But first I want to ask you, I want to ask you, what are you nurturing right now?
Oh, I am nurturing a bunch of plants because it's finally
Mm,
warming up enough that I just planted out a bunch of indigo at my
mm,
neighbor's place. And after we get done, I'm gonna go and plant some more stuff. And so
yeah.
all of my baby plants will be in the ground
Woo,
by bedtime.
that's amazing.
So that's literally what I'm nurturing today.
Nice. Indigo
It's
babies.
and it occurred to me that, like, this because you're way more of a farmer than I am. Um, the thing about planting indigo is I'm giving my future self, a lot of work.
Oh yeah. I
They're
was just
so
gonna
cute.
say, like, I'm
They're
nurturing the fact that I'm not planting anything this year. This is
they're
the
so cute right now.
I know, I know. They're so cute when you start these little trays. They're adorable. You're so proud of yourself. You're like, look at all the little babies. Then you're like, oh shit. These little babies are a lot of work. Yeah, no, as the first year in 15 years, I have not grown commercially a crop, which is a big deal.
It's huge.
And it is so freeing. And it's like it's this amazing like psychic freedom because I don't know about you, but when I put plants out, then I have this connection with them and I feel them. I have this vibration that comes from them. I've heard this from many farmers. I'm not just the only one, but when I was full CSA farming, I would dream about my plants at night. I would wake up knowing what needed to be watered, what was stressed, and I was always right. I would go right to that plant in the morning and be like, okay, this one, it was talking to me all night. And I find this season, I have this like space in my brain that I don't even think I realized was
Oh,
taken up by a little plant wave of things that, I mean, perennials are as out there doing their thing. When you start a seed and you nurture it and you plant it and you're like, these are my little rows, there is a different connection that's made. Um, than just having perennials in your yard that are just, they're doing their life and they don't really like they don't need you. Like they might, appreciate you, but yeah, it's a really interesting free space in my brain that I didn't even know was a bandwidth that was being used by plants until suddenly it's not. That
well,
makes
and
sense to anybody. But
it totally makes sense to me.
hmm
I remember reading, I feel like it was a conversation. Somebody was talking about a beekeeper when I was keeping bees, was talking about that there's this obligation, there's this like contract between
hmm
honeybees and humans,
hmm
and we got to do right by them, right?
Yep.
Like if you're keeping bees, you got to do right by them
Yeah,
because
they're connected to you. They're talking to you. They're
mhm.
energetically know that you've got a stake in their game and you're part of the hive maintenance. And like, yeah, they're talking to you. I had bees at one point too, and I felt the same thing. I mean, anybody who's a pet knows, right? You think about your pets, you know that they're thinking about you if they're hungry or need something, dogs, and it's
Well,
very real. Plants too.
also just like the animals and birds in our yard, like
Yeah.
this year there's two yearling females that don't have fawns that are
Mm,
hanging out in our yard a lot. And they literally walk by right outside my studio window, which is at ground level because it's in the and like I'm making eye contact daily. Speaking of talk about pets, here comes the hag. Um, here she is. So but yeah, like I'm total and there's totally like communication. Like they're
Hmm.
and Joe's got this one crow that's like following him around and
Oh, that's
jabbering
cool.
at him all the time right
I've
now.
always wanted a crow or a raven. I just think that's the best. One of these, well, it's an old lady,
Oh, I know, right?
bucket list thing is to like have my ravens that I feed and I talk to. I
Oh
look
yeah.
forward to being an even crazier old lady than I currently
Oh,
am. That's
absolutely.
for another episode of my whole vision of how to be a badass, crazy elder. That's that. But actually, this ties in. This ties into our topic today because futurisms,
Yes.
positive and negative futurisms is actually what we were trying to spin around on today. And the book, that we've been talking about that Iris was mentioning, it was called The Fifth Sacred Thing. It's by Starhawk. And Iris, I'm going to let you give a little intro to it.
So it was written in 1993, and which I think I got it as soon as it came out. And it's looking at the world, our world. It takes place in California. And it's taking place in 2048.
Hmm.
And
That's so
so
not that far away.
I
Oh my God.
know, I know, right? And it's
Hmm.
after there was a huge disaster in 2027.
Oh my
And
goodness.
I know. And
Oh my God.
it's so there's been this big split between the people that kind of banded together. There was kind of martial law, and the people in around the California Bay, they said no and kind of rebelled, and so they kicked out the kind of the martial law purveyors, and so they worked together to create um, a world based on the sacred things of earth and air and fire and water, and taking care of each other and figuring out how to make it all work after significant disasters have happened. Meanwhile, the despair, like in the rest of the, like in the LA, around in Southern California, it's there are those who have wealth, and then there are all of those who are, and it's all about water. They completely controlling the water. So like they're using permaculture and resurfacing rivers and stuff in the San Francisco, that reality, and they're sharing, and they're doing, working on detoxifying the bay, and then versus controlling people by controlling the water and basically deciding who gets to live and die and who
Mhm.
has a soul.
Yeah. And so there's a protagonist. What's her name again? I can't remember. I haven't read this book in a million years.
So there's a bunch of characters, the kind of the main family, so to
Hmm.
speak, of people that are, it's beautiful because they're not all necessarily actually related to each other, but
Right.
very so Maya is
Maya.
98 years old, and
Hmm.
she's an old hippie that did all sorts of activism. And then there is Bird, who went to the South and has been missing for
Mm.
10 years, who's a young man in his 20s. And then oh my gosh, her name just left me. I've been listening to this book nonstop for 4 days.
Isn't it like Magda or something?
It is. Oh my gosh, I can't believe you read it
Okay,
20
we're
years
not
ago.
we're not
We're not
doing
going to
a
do
book
that. We're,
club. But it's
we're
okay.
not
We don't
doing a
need to
book
know the
club.
names. We actually
That's
are just using this book as an example for a topic. So don't worry, don't get too
yes.
like caught up in the details
Okay,
of it.
thank you. Thank you. Thank
Don't
you.
stress.
Help, help.
Um, Everybody just read the book. It's amazing. If you haven't read it, definitely pick it up because 2027, that actually freaked me out when you just said that. I was like, oh, that's 3 years away, 2.5 years away,
Right.
halfway through 2024 right now. That's crazy. And the thing
Hey,
about Starhawk, everybody, the woman who wrote this book, is that she's an activist and a permaculturist, but she's also a full-on witch in the reclaiming tradition, which is like a big earth pagan. So I mean, makes no bones about it that she does magic and that this is coming out of her magical brain. Like this was channeled. It's fiction, but there's a lot in there that feels very prophetic. and very much like it was just coming through her to write this book, like as a warning, as a hope, as a yeah, just like as a vision that could go either way, or maybe both ways. Maybe it will, maybe there will be pockets. Who knows? Anyway, the idea that so encaptured me when you said you were listening to this book again, because I haven't thought about it in so long, was that was one of the books that I still go back to in my brain when I think about the future. When I think about a future that could be positive, nurture culture, I reference some of the things she wrote in The Fifth Sacred Thing in my brain, because
Yes.
she's one of the very few people out there that articulated it. Like she put it into a story, wrote it down, like talked about how they do self-governance and how they heal and how their sexual, energy runs between all of them. And it's just like, it's a very like, she gives you a really good like vision of how this community, this decentralized earth-based kind of community runs itself. And it's fascinating. And there's a couple more books she wrote too. I think there's 3 in the series, but I realize that because we live in a culture that we do that doesn't have a lot of these future positive eco visions, that I still reference a book that I read like 20 years ago or longer, and I think that since then, I don't know that I've seen that many other examples of positive ecological futures. There's a ton on the other side. I mean, so many that
Oh,
you
it's
go through Netflix,
ubiquitous.
open up Netflix and just scroll. Anything that's about the future is going to be dystopian, dark, sci-fi, and it really is almost always rooted in the ecological world being destroyed.
Yes.
I remember I read or I saw the movie The Road, which is about nuclear warfare, nuclear winter. And I mean, I was depressed for like a month after seeing that because it was so dark and so powerful. And I know he wrote it as a warning, right? But like still, oh my God, it
Well,
shook me. And I still think about that one too. And so I'm just saying that I want to talk to you about it because as we talk about nurture culture, a lot of what we have to do when we envision like where we want to go is have visions of where we could go. And
yes.
we find ourselves in a culture that keeps perpetuating this weird Christian, I'm going to call it Christian, dystopia and revelations based Armageddon scenario over and
Well,
over and over and over.
over and over. And it's like then it's like priming the pump
Exactly.
for us to co-create that reality.
And we are. And
And
that's the
we
thing.
are. Yeah, totally.
Like
And
self-destruction is happening.
I mean, this is this is just like a small example of that in in the opposite way, in like the good
Mhm.
possible way. So the scorcher, having that, trying to start a little business,
Mhm.
and we're like really concentrating on what's our daily break even point, da 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 da. And one of the people that worked there was like, dudes, we could totally do a $2,000 day. And this is like probably in 2010 or something. I'm like, a $2,000 day? Are you kidding? And then it's like, meanwhile, the bar next door is probably having $10,000 days at that point, and it was like, I just couldn't even conceptualize it. She's like, we can absolutely do that. And because
Mhm.
she'd worked at other restaurants, and I'm like, okay, we can do that. And, you know, I feel like having someone say, you can do this. I mean, I know whatever,
Absolutely.
but then we did. And then it was like, oh, we can do that. Well, we can do a $5,000 day,
Mhm.
and it's not like I don't know, I don't work there anymore, but like all I'm saying is it felt very clear that that was a watershed moment,
Mhm.
because for her to say that in a meeting and everyone to be like, really? Like,
Mhm.
and it's like, oh, we were totally keeping our concept of it small. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, that sounds really, I don't know how that sounds, but I just feel like it was, she expanded the sample space of what was possible.
Yeah, no, I think it's what you're saying is absolutely core to this is that when you don't have anybody saying it's possible, you like you don't even try. Like there's no attempt. Like there's a defeatism that's going on in the culture because no art is showing us what's possible in a
Yes.
positive way. I'm not saying none. I'm sure that there are plenty of artists, and I'm sure that there are other books that have been written, but the overwhelming majority, which is clear, is very dark and very, yeah, I mean, we're all just gonna, I mean, and of course, here comes AI, and so everyone's like, "Oh my God, didn't you watch the Terminator?" Like, here we're in it. We're in the tunnel of every movie that's ever been written about the destructive powers of like technology. I mean, we're like perfectly sitting in this like moment where these technologies come online, and already we're being warned like by the people who made them, like, oh, you should really regulate them. They're faster, smarter, more adaptive than we thought they would be. It's already like moving. And yet everyone's like latched onto that too. And look at all the money and resources and energy people are putting into AI. It's like this weird, like, because we saw it in a movie, like it's manifesting itself. Like these companies are really focused on making this virtual world, to live in. And where is that we have, if we took all just that same resources and we sourced it into a different vision of equality and earth healing, massive changes would be happening. We could heal the earth, and we really could. We're not doing it because there is, I believe, an underlying belief that isn't the future. The future is going to look dark and dystopian and technological. And there are companies vying for position right now to be able to have a stake in that dark, creepy future.
Right. it's versus,
And so
yeah,
they make it. They create the future so they can make money and control it, right? They're controlling the cyberspace. But like, it's so weird to me that because they've, these movies as visions have been made, then they're yeah, it's manifestation. Like, just like you said, somebody said it was possible. Then they're like, oh, then let's make it so.
well, and I do think that it is the role of the arts, is a huge part of that is to capture visions and to,
Mhm.
and I think that um which voices get uplifted is super political.
Of course.
So and when I, like 2 years ago when I had that Indigo show, and we did that boat. So you did one. I keep talking about this project, but I had all these strips of cloth and just Sharpies. And I told people, this is your vote for the future. So
Mm-hmm.
I gave them like a spiel, like one less than a minute, to imagine themselves in the most benevolent possible future and just feel around, look around, and then come back and then capture it in some way with words or a picture or just a design. And I did this with like a couple hundred people. And then I had this little group of kids, and we dyed them, and then I sewed it into a sail
It
for
was
a little
beautiful.
sailboat. And I told people, it's like we're navigating. And then I made some scrolls with it. And so like, and we collected more during the exhibit. But the thing, I have to give you the full story, but really what I want to talk to you about is people's emotional response to being given permission, that
Mm.
permission thing again, to
Mm-hmm.
envision a positive future,
A positive future. Yeah.
and specifically tasked with connecting to that positive future. And the
Yes.
number of people of the, you know, we I before the show I got 130 of them, and then during the show we got another like 80 strips. The number of people that started crying
Mm.
because that process was so moving to them was not, it was significant. It was a significant number of people were moved to tears at
Yeah. Let's
that.
talk about that. Let's talk about that because those tears are like grief. I think that this possibility has not been held out, and to them, like, and I think it's an acknowledgement of how hopeless that we do feel
Yes.
in the absence of these beautiful visions. And when we have someone offer something positive, like, oh no, we could co-create something beautiful and positive. Yeah, I feel it in my body. It's like, oh, I want that so bad. And yet I feel so alone in
Mm.
and like my little boat is adrift, and like this, you know, raging stream that's going in the other direction. That's like, nope, we're all just effed. And it's, so I think that and I don't think that's true, by the way. I'm not going to be a part of that stream. I'm not going to be like, and it's just, I'm just saying that it is really a grief that I don't think we speak enough about the lack of, yeah, our embracing a future that looks beautiful and amazing. And I can say that even on just a personal level, as a woman entering menopause, like the dark and scary stuff that they throw at you around this part of your life, which is like, oh God, it's going to be so horrible and it's going to be so much worse. And menopause is awful. And like, and that is, you get into spaces where you hear women talking and they buy into it. They focus on it. They drive it, And I was like one of the few people I know in my group of people I talked to, I guess, that was like when I turned 50, I was like, oh, I love 50. I'm going to be this really cool elder. Like, I can't wait to like be the most badass elder ever. And people were like, whoa, really? Because I always lie about my age. I don't want to turn 50. And there's like this,
Wow.
again, this cliff, of like, oh, because that means all these like bad things are going to happen. Your body's going to fall apart. You're going to be it's just like this whole story of like how you're less worthy, less active, less, your life is like ending. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not buying into that at all. Like, I don't feel it and I'm not buying into it. And I think there's a lot of women who are now changing that scenario and saying that, like, no, we love this part of our lives. But it's tied up with this idea that what you're fed from the patriarchy and the culture is like what you focus on. And our
Yeah.
brains can't help it. Like, we focus on what's been told to us. And when we think about other things, it feels like flights of fancy. But the reality
Right,
feels like
right, right.
what they've said, because that's the pervasive voice.
Well, and also it's like is like the future is not actually set.
No, it's not written at
And
all.
so if there are, let's say, like quantum mechanics, if there are infinite possibilities, infinite variations in how the future could go, that statistically, in some of them, everything works out.
Yeah.
And then it's sort of like once you're at that possibility, it's not like the lottery. If you've won the lottery, you 100% have won the lottery. For everybody else, you didn't, it's like it's kind of, you know what I mean? So it's like
Yeah.
it's not like probability, and
Right.
it's like it because there I don't know if that makes any sense, but like there's just so many options.
Yes.
And why is it more realistic to only be doom based? Why
Because
is
that's the only option we're being offered, like over
right,
and over
right,
and
right.
over and over. And it's like, it's ridiculous. I mean, I think when we talk about nurture culture, we cannot skip over this part of this negative futurism that is like everywhere, because this is the reason people are like, well, fuck it. I'm just going to live my life. And I mean, everyone should live their lives anyway, but like, this inability to see that there's anything else possible, that it's worth putting anything else into. And you know what? I talk about like grief and apathy are very closely related. So like apathy is like, yeah, why bother? It's like, it doesn't, you can see it's the stories, but we're playing out the story that we've been told.
Well, and I think
But it's a very dangerous mindset.
I mean, obviously, I keep feeling like I keep talking about cancer, but when people get sick, oh, I don't know if that came through. There's a big a big ship on the Columbia's is somebody, there must be somebody sailing
Oh,
in their way because it's Tuesdays anyway. Um, little hullabaloo out the window. Uh, when people get sick, they kind of in their head, they're like, oh, that's my death sentence.
yeah.
And it is, I mean, everyone 100% dies. We all
Yep.
have a death sentence. Absolutely. And maybe that's a train stop you're going to get out on, but it might not
Mm.
be. And I think like I don't know, I mean, this is so dicey because it sounds like I'm blaming people that die of cancer, and that's not what I'm doing. But I do feel like I chose to, um, I was like, you know what? I'm going to put as much effort as I possibly can um, into cultivating a vision of myself getting better.
Mm,
And I'm going to, and, and that's not the only thing I relied on. I didn't like wish my way out of it. I did, I did all the stuff
mm,
but the thing that was, it was because I'm like, this is a very serious diagnosis and my chance of dying of it are significant. And I was like, so I can either be really miserable and wait for that to happen, or I can just say, well, I'm going to get better until I'm proven wrong. I'm just going to cultivate trying to be happy as possible.
mm,
And, I don't have a depressive, that's not my go-to. So I have a unfair advantage for this strategy. This was my strategy.
mm,
But I kept thinking I would so much rather be happy and wrong than miserable and right. Like when it
mm.
all's said and done, if it's
There you
what
go.
kills me,
Mm-hmm.
so be it.
Right.
I'll be like, surprise, time
Yeah.
to die.
Yeah.
And that seemed way better than just being like consumed with dread and all the things. And part of that for me was just really accepting my own death, which was easier because I'd had 10 people die in the 10 years prior.
Mm,
So like I had been doing a
yeah.
lot of work with grief and a lot of work
Yeah.
with accepting my own mortality.
Yeah, acceptance is big. I think, that's why when we talk about nurture culture, we cannot get around. It's not like, oh, there's a fantasy and we should all, it's not like spiritual bypassing where you're like, oh, but things will be beautiful if we just hope they will be. No, it actually feels way more like a deep acceptance of where we're at and tons of grief work for how we've gotten here and like all the things we've lost and all the delusions that we've been holding on to think, I mean, we have to really do that process. It's core into this, I think, the healing that has to happen. And I think you're right. I think as a species, we're at that point of like, we might not make it. So we just have
Right.
to accept that we're here. This is what's going on. Do our best, choose joy, choose the positive, beautiful future we want, and aim
And
our
work
boats.
and work and
Yeah, aim our boats in that direction, man.
yes.
Do it. And I also think that there's some interesting piece that just came through when you were talking, because I had just coached someone not that long ago who was very sick, had a lot of symptoms, chronic illness, and she had some thoughts about, well, a thought that gave her relief was like, well, maybe I'll just die. Well, maybe I'll just die anyway. And she was really freaked out about that thought. I'm like, oh, that's interesting, but it brought you some relief. So we kept digging into it. Like, why did it bring you relief? That's a good emotion. And there was just some acceptance and surrender in that. Instead of fighting it and trying to make it better and trying to find the doctor and trying to find the remedy, it was just like, okay. And then I also, and this is what I just came to me, I said, it's like teens have suicide ideation, not because they really want to kill themselves, but because they're acknowledging that a part of them is dying, right? Like their childhood needs to die in order for them to be an adult. And so they have these like thoughts about death and ending, and our unskilled culture, I think we're like, oh my God, they're going to kill themselves. But like, I really think that what that's about, if we had any kind of initiation rites or any, traditions left around teenage years, we would understand this is normal. Like yeah, they're going through a death, a transition. This is a huge change. Similarly, I think our culture is doing that. Like we are
Yes.
dying. It's a part of us is dying. This whole thought form of this apocalypse, of this, like it maybe it needs to die. Maybe it needs to go and have its apocalypse and die so that we can pass through that tunnel and live like without this damaging story that's been hanging around for a couple thousand years on the planet, that this is the goal, right? We're just supposed to get to this
Well,
like horrible fiery place. I mean, maybe, and I'm not saying they have to burn the earth to do it, although it's happening. I'm just saying that the death that this the death, it could be like a thought form. It's a death of a thought form, a death of a way of thinking, of fear, of a way of being that is dying, needs to die, needs to be raptured so we can let something else grow in its place. Transfer, death is just transformation.
well,
So
think it's it because I think it's acknowledging how impactful our thoughts are and how they create our reality in very real ways, not
Mm-hmm.
in a like, new age, whatever, bring me a Lamborghini way,
Mm-hmm.
but in that sort of like, what can it's like the expansion of our sample space. Like, what can I expect out of my life? Well, not a lot, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And that keeps you from reaching out. I don't know. It's
That
and
that feels purposeful to me. Like there's like you said earlier, I think was like that feels political. Like the idea that we don't have these images of a better future is like then nobody's pushing for them, right? Because we don't even know that that's a possibility. We don't know what it looks like. I mean, even if you travel and go to Japan or something, you're like, oh my God, like you come back with this whole idea of like, oh, America isn't all that, right? I mean, I've seen better. I've seen countries doing this way, way better. Transportation, healthcare, cleanliness, all of it. And
yes.
so there is like Hollywood's producing so many dark dystopian films and people buy them up. They gobble them up. They just love, there's a lot of consumption of this. And I'm just curious about that. Like, why do you
It's like
think,
hypnosis.
yeah, it's like, give me another hit of this dark future. So it somehow justifies my numbing, my, just numbed out strategies of existing. Like, I don't, maybe it's like that relief that she was talking about. And my client, it's like, well, we're
Yeah.
always going to die anyway. So there's a little bit of relief, like
Because you
maybe
can
in the
just like,
hustle of all of what the other side of capitalism, which is work, 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 work. Maybe this idea that we're all just going to blow up, there's like some kind of dark release in that. Like, okay, then fine, who cares? I can let myself off the hook a little bit. And it's not help. I'm not saying this is a good thing. I'm just trying to understand why this is such an appealing. Like if we're supposed, and I guess it's Christian, if you're supposed to be so good and striving and the penance and all, things, the idea that you're, inherently sinful, then this idea of this fiery ending is kind of like awesome, right? Because it frees you from this constant striving to be better,
of
to be good enough.
because you're inherently bad.
Yeah,
And it's very dichotomy. It's such a dichotomy,
for
right?
sure.
So yeah, I
And if you just erase all that and like that's not a true story because it is just a story and you just get back to like that, and that's where the grief comes in, I think, because that's just like, oh my God, like what have we been doing this whole time?
well, I
If none of that is true, that's just a story that, we've bought into, then we've wasted a lot of time.
so I'm going to go back to the book
Yeah,
because
go
I
ahead.
can't help it. Because it's what I've been
Please do.
dreaming about and reading, listening. But specifically, I think that our mind, because we've been so entrained with all this darkness, it's hard for us to hear something without feeling it's so irrational or Pollyanna. Or it's like hard for us to imagine into something working out because we've really been given the hard sell on it. What's realistic is we're all going to die a horrible death somehow.
Mhm.
But I think that what Starhawk does, that I think is really powerful, is that she shows that they're still struggling, but they're like, come back to come back to working together.
Mhm.
This is what we've, and it's and she there's like a lot of meetings in the book, which I think is great.
Accurate.
It's because there's a lot of meetings, right? If
Sure
you
are.
have to collaborate as a community, you have to do that, And at one point, one of the characters wants to go someplace because another character is going to do this journey and gets vetoed by their house, their the people that they share a house with. And they're like, it's not only your decision. We're going to demand that you take care of yourself and
Mhm.
not go. And
Mhm.
and it's like as I was really running that through my head too of like is part of the appeal of the Armageddon films that it's like the Mad Max. You've got this like lone wolf
Yeah.
savior or this lone wolf, like, John Wick or whatever.
Hmm.
And that and I wouldn't describe, I mean, I guess probably is described as utopian, but like the positive future, I think is not really, I don't know. I'm having a hard time imagining a positive future in which that allows this rampant individualism.
Individualism. Yeah.
I don't think it, I think
Hyper
that
individualism,
hyper
hyper
individualism.
masculinity. Like, I mean, you can
Yeah.
see the patriarchies all in the archetypes are all there in those films. There's always like this. Yeah, it's the warrior, right? There's an endless war. That's the idea. It doesn't matter, like, insert, cartoon characters or spaceships or whatever you want. The theme is always the same. It's like
Yeah.
there's a battle, there's a war, and yeah, then the heroes are like these no rules, Mad Max and all that. But then you have the reality of what actual culture looks like, which is more feminine, people making meals and sitting down and having meetings and trying to understand like complicated solutions to cleaning up waterways. And you know what I mean? That is actually what society needs to do to heal. There's so much healing that has to take place. In 2024, this book is set in 3 years, which is, I'm still tripping on that.
The book set in 2048, but there was a big
The disaster.
disaster
The
that happens in
2027. Okay.
2027.
Still, 2048 is not very far away. That is
Well, in 2027
wild.
is very
It
close.
is really close. So everyone just pay attention. This book, something you should read.
Oh,
But
yeah, totally.
I think in general, the point that is so important for me is that we have to have a vision to hold on to expand our possibilities of what we could do in the future. And we don't just need to do that for ourselves. We need to do that for future generations, because it's obvious that we're not going to make the changes we need to make in my lifetime. Like, the damage is going to be multi-generations of healing and healing. And I think that we're planting seeds, So some of those seeds of nurture culture that we have to plant are, as elders, as we move into this realm, is yeah, storytelling, visioning, like thinking of
Yes.
all the ways it could look. It doesn't matter if it's a fantasy, because guess what? All those dark visions, they're fantasies. They're not real.
Yeah, right.
They're not real. I mean,
Right.
they
They're
feel
no,
real because
right.
we've seen them so many times. They're not. It's just a dark fantasy. You could just as easily imagine a beautiful fantasy, and where things do work out and people do, heal and, understand that we are all codependent, not codependent, interdependent and codependent. But I think I'm just going to throw out there that when the transgender thing started happening and the whole gender binary started getting like whatever,
Freaked out.
I thought that was actually like the best sign ever. Like, to me, that was like a sign that we have potential to question some pretty fundamental pieces of the puzzle that we've been handed for a long time. And that was just kind of spontaneously emerged, like all at once. It was ready, like, to emerge into I know it's been there, but like into the consciousness of this country. All of a sudden it was like, oh no, we're here. We're doing this now. Gender is no longer a thing that, we accept as a black and, a polarity. That's very, very promising for the ability to envision something that looks very different, because that was the most different looking thing that I've seen in my lifetime. Everything else, yeah. But that was like, whoa, that actually is a game changer. That changes society. That changes relationships.
Which is why it's so
community.
dangerous
Which is why they do not like it. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's why, and it's the thing that it's like, ironically, it's really difficult for people to maintain an enemy imaging with a person that embodies whatever trait that they're afraid of, if they're actually talk to that person.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, if gender's way bigger than two, and you're interacting with a child who is not gender A or B, you can't really look at that young person and think to yourself, I mean, I guess you can. I mean, people are looking at the people and looking at children and thinking that they're influenced by the devil. But like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, I think it requires that we keep people separate. We create the dialogue in a very small sample space of what is possible to talk
Mhm.
about. And as long as you do that, then you can maintain that we're not actually all in this together. Because
Yeah.
if people get it that we're all in this together, then you start questioning some of the things that are common struggles and how they're sourced and yeah,
Yeah.
all
I
the
think
things.
I think you're spot on with, the idea of the role of the artist is this is such a powerful role for the artists right now to take up this banner of positive futurism, and I wanted to give a shout out to Afrofuturism because some of my favorite things that I've seen on the internet are this really cool like marriage of like Afrocentrism and like futurism and them doing art and music and writing around this incredible like alien, like connection with the African spirituality and like this beautiful imagery coming out. I just love it. I think the music that's coming out, it's very positive. It's very beautiful and fun, and that's the other thing. It's fun because it opens you up. It opens up your heart of like, oh, that's possible. Like that is an amazing image of like, um, these beautiful black, goddesses that have like kind of alien, components to them, but you're just like, whoa, that's so cool. I never thought about it that like I never thought that was a thing. But it's like when you see it that your heart opens. I think what is Charles Eisenstein's like the more beautiful world that our hearts know is possible, right? That's the name of that book.
Mm,
And I go back to that a lot. It's like our hearts know it's possible when we see it. Our hearts respond to it like your
yes.
sails. That's why people had an emotional response to it. Their hearts had a response to it. Even if the brain is lagging behind and it has the story about no, that's just a bunch of hippie whatever. You
But
just
it is,
we just have to we just have to realize that we're creating it. Like we are creating this dream every second and we have to keep our eyes on what we're trying to create. Like, and that's why I feel like I had to move away from traditional activism because it was always just a response to the story. The story was destruction, 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 and like the response was no, 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 and like these I didn't but where was the other answer of like, well, in a certain future this would be unthinkable to do what you're doing. Like I want to live in a culture that wouldn't even conceive of doing what you're doing. Wouldn't
right.
conceive of building a nuclear power plant on a fault line or chopping down an entire watershed, to sell it for cheap bucks. Like this is not this isn't a culture I can even understand. And at some point in the future, there is going to be a culture that exists like that. That this is the nurture culture. It would be inconceivable. Just as it was to indigenous people before colonialism, they never
Right.
understood the insanity that showed up. And we can't go back because here we are in 2024. So what do we do moving forward?
I think that I think it goes to like Wendell Berry talks about community as people that depend on each other, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so it's like, how do we, how do we, um, how do we address our needs in ways that are win-win, like what is that net zero? What is that? Like zero, what is it when it's not causing harm?
Mm-hmm.
When it's, and I'm not like
Yeah.
sustainable is kind of a weird word. That's not the
Mm-hmm.
word I want. Like,
I want more than sustainable. You know what I mean?
yes,
Like I want
I
beautiful.
want thriving. I
I want
want,
thrive. I want ecstatic. Like that's the thing is we can't even imagine. We in this culture that we're in, we don't have the brains because of what we've experienced to know how good it can get. We can't
it's like the
imagine how
pathway,
beautiful.
like
Yeah,
how the
we don't have it
pathway.
because no one's envisioned it yet. Like we're not seeing that wave of art and writing and music that's like putting it out there. Like this is how good it can get. Oh, and guess what? It can get better and better. And that 2000 day could be a $5,000, $1,000,000. You know what I mean? And if you just turn
Yes.
that into like how beautiful, how healed, how incredible, how vibrant, how ecstatic human experience with this planet could be, because it could be. Like, we have all the things here that make ecstatic life completely possible. This is an amazing planet. We are so lucky to be on.
Oh, it's so cool.
And, just to walk around with this story that it's like, nope, it's such a cool planet, but nope, we get to, destroy it because that's our role. It's like, because we're sinners, whatever the hell weird story. It's just bullshit. And it's also kind of a form of insanity. Not kind of, it is a form of insanity.
Yes.
And
Well,
it's driven us to the brink of extinction. So it's really time for positive futurism. That's what I'm saying. Like, the fifth sacred thing shows you very clearly, that book, what one can look like and what the other can look like. And there's potential for both. And there's a character that goes through to like one side to the other and comes back. So there's like this idea of the mind, like there's this two different ideas. And then there's this connecting like little piece of magic that connects the two, understands compassion for the one, brings back, because they can talk to each other.
right.
And
And also it totally explores that idea of like she's going and they keep telling her, tell the story again of that place. And they don't even believe it when she tells them about how they treat water.
Right.
Because it's just so they don't even, they're like, tell that again. We need to hear it again. But even though they don't really believe it, they want to believe it. And it's like, even though she's like, that's where I'm from, like, of course it's true, like she's lived it. And so, and like one of the characters is referring to her and she's like, you walk differently, you move differently. And like, you've traveled. I mean, like I totally noticed when I was in Southeast Asia that people were in their bodies differently than we are here. People move differently. And it's like, it's like, oh, like,
intense. Exactly.
all tense, like,
Yep.
so yeah. Oh, it's such a wonderful book. I'm really.
Yeah. So everybody, The Fifth Sacred Thing by Starhawk. And she has, I think it's three of them. I think it's
I just
to
found
Mercury
this.
is the second one. And then I think there's a third as well. And I'm gonna have to reread all three of them again.
I need to get a copy of the other two immediately.
But we're 3 years out from when this big disaster of this book is supposed to happen. So we should probably all start reading and getting ready. She doesn't reference Oregon in the book, but I'm imagining that's going to be a really cool
Did you read Ecotopia?
I did read Ecotopia, and I almost brought it up because that was one we read in college. And Ecotopia was cool, but like, it was so tinged with like the 70s, I think, that it was kind of like, even in the 90s when I was reading it, I was like, oh my God, like there was this way too much like free love kind of woven into it. It was just like, had a little bit of a male fantasy going on. What that would entail, which, all hail the male fantasies, that's fine. But I did not
it didn't hook me. It didn't
hook me the way this one did, because I don't think he has the skill of the envisioning like to the depth that she does and the way she wrote it. And because she's an activist, she really has experience with these worlds, these movements trying to make change and who are making change. And also she's had experience with being in jail and being locked up and being, abused by police officers. She has been in it, so she can write it with this power that I think Ernest Callenbach, I think, was the guy who wrote Ecotopia, did not. But it's still a cool book. I mean, he tried. He was like one of the very few people who did. He wrote a book about what it could look like to have
I'll have to
ecological health. For sure.
Because I feel like there are some other books. I just have to like.
No, there totally are.
There's some other books. It would be great if people, I don't know, do people comment on our podcast?
Yes, people comment. If you're listening to this and you're like, oh my God, I know a book, just leave that in the comments. That would be great, actually.
I think it would be great to have to assemble a reading list of books that provide options.
Make it the summer of positive futurism. This is a good summer reading list. Just fill yourself up. And I also want to shout out to the book that Iris, I know, is writing. And it's true. Very much in line with this theme. And someday it will be published. So shout out to the what do you want to call it? The magical cat, the cat.
Well, it's they're like, I mean, it's Studio Cat Dreams in Color, but there's different colors. So there's small,
I've heard a beautiful outline kind of sketch of the book that Iris is visioning and is writing. So stay tuned
And
for that. And everybody, yeah, I just want to encourage you when you're in a space of thinking about your own personal future, like just be aware of what comes up for you and just be curious about why. Like, why does it look like that? Like where did that come from? Question the images, question
yes.
the thoughts. Think about them. How could it be better? How could it be, and why do you think it can't be better? And I know that in my heart too, I can hear myself, oh, there's science and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, of course there is. But that doesn't mean if everybody had a revelation of a positive way, if the revelations happened in a positive way where suddenly everyone just woke up and was like, oh my God, we could be doing this completely differently. I'm going to be a loving, healing presence on the planet. That could be a revelation. What if that revelation happened? Everybody just
Right.
woke up and was like, we're not doing this bullshit anymore. We're all just going to dedicate the rest of our lives to healing the earth and each other.
Because people have walked that path. There are
People have
people
walked
that
that path.
people have walked that path. People are walking that path right now. Like,
Yeah.
there
So, I
was this.
mean, that could be just as a real revelation as any other dark revelation of,
I mean, this is another book that I just thought of, which is called Remarkable Remission. I think it's called. Her name is Dr. Kelly something, but she was studying. She worked in oncology, and she somehow she saw this article about somebody that had a remarkable remission, and she's like, wait, what? Like, because she'd had anyway. Long story short, she's been studying, interviewing people that have medically documented remissions, spontaneous remissions from like stage 4 cancer, which is like the end, right? So and she's been collecting stories, and she's a researcher person. And
Mm.
her thought was, if people, this is exactly like this. I totally wish I'd remembered this earlier. She was saying, if people, she's like, how is it that I have been working in oncology, and I've, whatever, all this education, and it's never been brought to my attention before that people have gotten better?
Yeah.
Like, and we have to tell these stories of the people that get better,
Yeah.
because it's possible. It's
Mm.
not pie in the sky,
It's not. No, it's
because it's
real.
happening. It's
It's happening.
totally, people have totally spontaneously recovered. I mean, my own
Yeah.
story, my surgeon wrote a paper about my thing because
Mm.
I got better when they didn't think. So like, I mean, I don't know if I think I do count for that actually.
You
So,
absolutely
so, so like, like, it's like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, whatever. Like, I'm
Well,
not,
our
it's so
brains have,
dicey.
yeah, it is. And our brains have a negativity bias for survival. It serves our survival to focus on the things that aren't working or could potentially hurt us, right? So
Right,
we
right.
evolved to scan for that. We evolved to think, oh, well, we better be prepared for the worst, because the worst could happen. And, and if you don't think about it all the time, you're not going to be prepared. There is like an illogical loop in there, because that's actually not true. The more you think about a negative future, the more stressed out you get, the more you lean into creating and doing the activities that would lead to that future. You don't become safer. Actually being safer is being in the present moment and
Mm.
navigating from actually observing the reality that you're in. Worrying about a potential negativity, which feels safe to the brain, feels like we're preparing, actually is anxiety, which makes you focus on all the things that could go wrong, which makes you react to those things, and you set yourself on a trajectory. I think as a culture we do that. We are turned towards this, like, oh my God, and we have a lot of anxiety. We're a super anxious culture, and we are like perpetuating this dark path of destruction because of it. And
Well, go, go,
yeah,
go.
no, I just feel like, so I feel like it's worth calling out, like you just said. It doesn't make you safer, and we don't need to do that in our society. We're not being chased by lions anymore. Like this evolutionary part of our real brain, we have to remember that it's not helping us anymore. It's actually hurting us.
And it's being used against us very
Yes.
deliberately by
Yes. And it's
those that
very
profit
easily
from it.
manipulated
Very
because it's very
manipulated.
strong, because it's
Yeah.
associated with survival. And the more stressed out we are, the easier we are to be in that survival state, easier we are to buy in, because it's where we are anyway, because we're pushing and we're exhausted. So this is all just part of that loop. So the nurture culture, in order to exist, it's an individual thing. It's an individual buyout. We have to buy out of that at a daily basis and just invest in a future that looks the way we want it to look.
Was it Michelangelo, critique by creating, and
Yes.
instead of just opposing?
Yeah, that's what I was saying about activism. It was very draining to do that because you can't help but be in the thought form. You're very invested in the thought form when you're opposing something. And when you churn away from it, it's nothing wrong with opposing it, by the way, it needs to happen. But like when you churn away from it and you start to create, that is when your energy can flow like towards the actual like
Well,
thing you're trying to expand.
isn't that like, no one's saying that if you were, it wouldn't, no one's saying do that 12 hours a day and don't do anything else. But it's like, the thing is about that, it's like there's not permission to do it for 1 minute.
Yeah, there's no choice.
There's, yeah,
What we're trying to say is this is a choice. It
yes.
feels like reality. It feels like we're on this just trajectory. This is what we're doing. This is what humanity is just, but no, we have to remember we have a
It's like
choice.
it's hypnotic
It's
suggestion.
very much. And that's why you have to be really careful, I think, about the media that you do put into your brain because it's powerful, because it's influencing your brain's ability to envision something. So when you see a very powerful movie or read a book or any of it, like it's, without the positive balance, it's very easy to slip into like, oh, that's what's going to happen. Look at it. It's all there. My brain can totally see it. All the images are already there for me. And
Right.
therefore, we kind of tacitly accept that these corporations are going to merge and merge and merge and create AI and do all the things they're actually doing. So instead of being like, that's insane, we should stop that. It's more like, yeah, that's going to happen. So I don't know how to end this I want to end this in a positive way because this is all about the positive future. So give us a positive ending, Iris.
Well, I think that, I mean, I'm thinking a lot about kids because I'm getting ready to do this camp. And I've been thinking about, I think here's my prompt for people
Okay.
is, I've been thinking a lot about interactions that I had as a young person that were positively influenced me in big ways. And that's why I'm reading this book 30 years after I read it for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that if you go back and you look for it, you're going to find that third grade teacher who really believed in you, or that grocery store person that was always really nice to you and made you feel really seen, and or that, librarian that helped you get the right book, that helped you start your business when you were 19. I don't know who those people are. Your grandmother, the lady next door, your best friend's mom. Like, I think that we all have those benevolent helpers, that have helped us. And then, so I mean, look at that, and then recognize your power to do that for another human.
Mm-hmm.
So like, I don't know.
Yeah.
That's my prompt. I've been really thinking about, like, God, I sound so freaking self-righteous, but
You don't. No, you do not. I think that's really powerful because what you're saying is like scan and look for the positives, which are always there. And even
yes.
if you've gone through something really hard, even as a culture, we're going through something very hard. There's no doubt about it. We're going through a very hard time. If you step back and look at things in your life that have been extremely hard, they were usually trying to get you somewhere. There's some transformation underway, and you don't know what that looks like until you're through it. So I think we're in this tunnel all together on planet
Yes.
Earth. We don't know what it's going to look like until we get through it. Maybe we're all going to die. Like, okay, that's just a transformation.
Exactly.
Whatever. I mean, I
Exactly.
have to say, like, if I have to say something positive, like, we don't know what we don't know. So the most powerful thing we can do is to imagine and create and plant as many seeds as we can for the future generations to pick up and grow, that don't look anything, that look very different, that are coming from different spiritual places in our bodies than what we were handed. We're already like in the middle of this work. It's already happening. Like we're already, like you just said, people are picking, we've had seeds that we picked up and are carrying forward. Like one of them is this book. It's our job, I think, and not our job in a way that we're responsible, our job as like unfurling our own selves, that we are the seeds. Like each of us is the seed. We just have to live our full expression and not be scared that there's no point in doing that because there's this dark future ahead.
We don't know yet.
We don't know that. And the
We
thing
don't
is,
know.
like, you can't stop your seed from growing if that's, I mean, you're not even giving it a chance. Like you're here. You're here. You're alive. You're breathing. Do it. Just do it.
We're all in the Super Bowl, man. We made the elite team to be here
Exactly.
now.
To be here now, and I know this is woo, but I do believe we chose what the times we come in. So the seeds we are carrying are designed for this moment, for this transformational moment. So if you're listening to us, you certainly are a person who has been thinking about
If you're
this.
listening this far,
Like if you're listening this far, you've got a seed, okay? Like you probably got a whole handful of seeds. Please do us a favor and write the thing, paint the thing, sing the song, do it, because we need to do it. We need everyone to do it. And whatever you think is in your way is an illusion. It's just a piece of what's going to make the seed grow.
I can't wait to see what everybody makes.
We're doing it. We made a podcast. That was one of the things we're making. Okay.
All right. Thank you, babe.
We love you so much. Here's to the positive future. The book is The Fifth Sacred Thing, and all praises to the 5 sacred elements and to Starhawk for writing it, because
yes, 100%.
What an amazing, and certainly it should be a movie someday, because we all should watch that movie.
Right. Oh, the reader is great if you want to have it if you want to listen to it.
Yeah. Download it. Okay.
All right. Love, love, love.
Love,
Bye-bye.
love, 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 love.